What's up guys, welcome back. This is Anime Crossover. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was a Saiyan Who Crash Landed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Part 9. Now, let's begin. The most horrifying sound in a conflict over infinite dimensions was not the blare of a cannon, it was absolutely silent. The Panopticon hung in the quantum bleed for 3 months, scanning the unspooled branches of the multiverse with gigantic tachyon arrays. Following the tragic destruction of the Scarlet flagship and the stability of the Sanctuary Zone, the Multiversal Alliance prepared for the ultimate vengeance. They had strengthened the World Tree Network, equipped 100 Earths, and waited. But the Council of Kangs did not fight back. The Vanguard Dreadnoughts have departed from the Sanctuary Zone. The incursions halted. The dynasty had totally disappeared into the deepest, undetectable frequencies of darkness. "I hate the quiet," Tony Stark of Earth 892 said, peering at the immaculate, tranquil holographic map in the center of the Panopticon observation platform. When a warlord is quiet, he is reloading. When an infinite empire becomes silent, they are developing a new type of weapon. Sam Wilson, dressed in a new vibranium weave Captain America costume, leaned against the console. "Our scouts in the Omega Quadrant have not discovered a single chronal footprint. It's as if Immortus's people simply packed up and left the multiverse." "They have not left, Captain," Sorcerer Supreme T'Challa replied, his hands gracefully steepled in front of his robes. "A predator does not forsake its hunting grounds because it received a cut. It simply retreats to higher ground to view its victim." Naruto Uzumaki sat cross-legged on the chilly silver deck near the viewport, eyes closed. He wasn't wearing armor. He donned a modest, light martial arts outfit. The deep, deadly violet gold fire of his initial Void Sage mode had evolved. As he exhaled, a perfectly peaceful, balanced white gold aura with rich violet undertones pulsed gently over his skin. It was the Genesis mode, a condition of being that not only consumed multiversal radiation but also passively regulated the chaotic space-time around him. He'd become an anchor for reality itself. The sheer metaphysical weight was taxing. "You're brooding again, old man," Miles Morales said, sliding upside down from the ceiling via a web line and halting inches from Naruto's face. Naruto smiled briefly as he opened one blue eye during his concentration. "I am 21 years old, Spider-Man. I am not old." "You've got the soul of a retired grandfather who just wants to fish," Miles quipped before flipping down and landing silently on his feet. His Arachnid Mark I suit, with its sleek red and black Stark tech, changed seamlessly. "Really, though? You're exuding so much peace right now that I think I've forgotten how to be stressed." "The silence is unnatural," Naruto confessed, getting up and stretching his super tense Saiyan muscles. He stepped up to the holotable and stood next to Sam and Tony. "Griffin and Ramatut aren't the kind to admit defeat. They see us as an equation to be solved." Tony's response was interrupted by a violent glitch in the multiverse map. The emergency sirens remained silent, the blast doors did not seal. Instead, a perfectly geometric ripple in space-time appeared at the center of the observation deck. It wasn't a star-shaped multiversal gateway or a horrific, bleeding red rift from a Vanguard incursion. It was a perfectly silent, golden tear in reality. A 4-foot-tall obelisk of polished black chronal metal and luminous gold circuitry appeared on the deck after the tear. The rift suddenly closed behind it. "Intruder!" Sam yelled, his shield quickly in his grip. Tony's Endo-Sim armor appeared in a flash of silver, his repulsors groaning at full yield. Miles dropped into a combat crouch, his hands flashing with golden yellow bioelectricity, while Naruto did not draw his sword. He raised his hand, urging them to hold their fire. "It is not a bomb," Naruto stated, his sovereign senses assessing the object. "There's no plasma. There's no degradation." The obelisk chimed faintly, indicating that it is a transmitter. When the top of the construct opened, a flawless, high-fidelity hard light hologram came to life. It was Mr. Griffin. Kong, dressed in a stylish 3-piece suit, exuded corporate elegance. He was seated at a gigantic mahogany boardroom table that appeared to stretch into an indefinite abyss. "Good afternoon, Alliance," Griffin said in a silky voice that lacked the wrath and fanaticism of his deceased brothers. "I apologize for the surprise delivery. I guarantee you that this is a diplomatic conversation." "You forfeited your right to diplomacy when you eliminated Brooklyn," Miles yelled, the optics of his mask narrowing fiercely. "Ah, Spider. Griffin smirked coldly as he continued to clutch onto localized grievances. I told you, youngster, it was business. And it is precisely business that has led me here today. The Council of Kangs has met. We evaluated data from the Panopticon siege. Griffin leaned forward and rested his elbows on his desk. You've proven to be extremely stubborn, Griffin confessed. You defeated the Scarlet Fleet. You successfully stabilized the Sanctuary Zone. You created a world tree that stubbornly refuses to burn. We determined that to utterly destroy your alliance in a conventional conflict, 4 million universes would have to be detonated. Then bring them, Sam challenged, gripping the vibranium shield tightly. We could, Griffin replied, nodding. However, an indefinite war of attrition is costly. It shatters the fundamental fabric of the multiverse we seek to control. If we fight you over the limitless branches, there will be nothing left to conquer except ash. And I'm not in the business of ruling a graveyard. Get to the point, Griffin, Tony said, his repulsors still glowing. The point, Mr. Stark, is consolidation, Griffin stated, his holographic eyes fixed on Naruto. We are bringing an end to the Battle of Infinite Fronts. We built a new arena in the deepest trench of the quantum bleed. A localized, impenetrable sector of reality formed from the fragments of pruned worlds. The hologram altered, revealing a horrific patchwork planet. The universe was made up of ruins from New York, Wakandas, Asgards, and hidden villages. We call it Battleworld, Griffin explained. The corporate Kongs stared at the Alliance's assembled leaders. We are issuing a formal invitation, Griffin stated. The Multiversal Alliance's champions face up against the absolute apex versions of the dynasty. There are no unending fleets. No orbital bombardment. A purely localized champions contest. If you prevail, the dynasty will retreat to the sacred timeline, allowing the world tree to flourish. But if we prevail, you give up the Panopticon and succumb to the loom. You want us to fight in a tournament for the fate of reality? T'Challa asked, his gaze narrowing. This is a trap. You intend to isolate our leaders. Of course it's a trap, sorcerer, Griffin laughed, his voice dry and sincere. You'll accept it regardless. Because if you don't, we'll cease targeting military outposts and instead start dropping withering suns on the civilian populations of your world tree. Naruto's white gold aura burst, revealing the cage's fury. You will not touch them, Naruto cautioned, rattling the obelisk's metal. Then accept the invitation, Void Sage, Griffin said, smiling. The coordinates are encoded on this obelisk. You have 24 hours to assemble your champions and travel to Battleworld. If you do not arrive, we will burn the tree. The hologram flickered and ended. The observation deck became eerily quiet. He's bluffing, Tony replied, but he didn't seem convinced. A tournament? Is this an interstellar gladiator match? It's a bait and switch. It doesn't matter if it's a trap, Sam remarked, dropping his shield. He examined the map of the multiverse. If there is even a 1% risk that they may destroy our civilian worlds, we must accept the bait. We went to Battleworld and defeated their apex versions. I am in, Miles responded quickly, his fists stiffening. Naruto gazed at the golden obelisk. The Genesis mode pulsed in his veins, but it couldn't take away the strange, creeping dread that had crept in his stomach. Griffin was overly calculated. He wouldn't propose a localized battle until he was certain he had a weapon that the Alliance couldn't defeat. Naruto stepped forward, reaching out to check the obelisk's golden circuitry. Naruto told Tony to perform a subatomic scan on the transmitter, hovering his palm an inch above it. I want to know exactly how it bypassed T'Challa's wards. Scan now, Tony ordered Friday. Suddenly, the golden obelisk unleashed a thunderous cry. Wait! Naruto's eyes widened as his sovereign senses penetrated the device's chronal protection. It's not a transmitter, it is an anchor. Boss! Massive spatial displacement was detected within the room. Friday yelled above the alarms. Get back! Naruto shouted and lunged forward, knocking Sam and Miles out of the center of the deck. He was too late. The gold obelisk detonated. It exploded without causing flames or concussion. It detonated in bright white chronal light. The small displacement field quickly engulfed Naruto, Sam, Miles, and Tony 892. The anchor's multiversal gravity overpowered any physical or magical shielding. T'Challa hurled a mystic shield at the light, but it was soon consumed. A vacuum seal break reverberated throughout the panopticon. The golden obelisk vanished as the dazzling white light faded. Similarly, the Alliance's 4 champions. T'Challa stood alone on the observation platform, staring at the vacant spot where his brothers in arms had previously stood. The 24-hour timer was a deception. The dynasty didn't wait for an RSVP. The secret wars had already started. The teleportation didn't feel like the smooth localized folding of space they were used to. It felt like being dragged through a field of shattered glass, bare. Naruto, Sam, Tony and Miles hit solid ground with bone-rattling force. Sam's suit's kinetic dampeners shrieked as Tony's endo-sim armor rapidly hardened into a hefty, impact-resistant shell to absorb the catastrophic deceleration. Naruto hit the ground on his feet, sliding to a stop, his vibranium boots leaving deep pits in the unusual red-colored dirt. He breathed at once, tapping into the Void Sage. Genesis mode. A white-gold aura, outlined in deep, soothing violet, erupted into being about him. The multiversal pressure, chaotic and unpleasant, that threatened to crush their internal organs, was instantaneously pushed back, forming a contained 20-foot sphere of stabilized, terrestrial physics. "Everyone stay inside the light," Naruto said, his voice taut as he kept watch on the perimeter. Sam pulled himself up, wincing as he popped his shoulder back into place. "Where are we?" "The panopticon comms are totally out. It's simply noise." "Because we aren't in the bleed anymore," snarled Tony 892. His silver faceplate peeled back. His eyes were gaping wide at the holographic readouts shown before his retinas. "Friday is having a fit. The gravitational constant changes every 3 seconds. The magnetic poles are reversed and the atmosphere is a scary combination of oxygen, argon and temporal exhaust." Miles stood up and rubbed his head. His arachnid Mark I suit optics widened in horror as he gazed up. "Guys, gaze up in the sky." The 3 vets followed the teen's look. It was a sky that didn't make any sense. It was not an atmosphere. It was a badly embroidered tapestry of truths. To the east hung a dying crimson sun above a bruised purple nebula. Above, a broken ocean floated, defying gravity, its waters flashing with neon blue radiation. To the west the sky was pure pitch black, filled with the spreading, metallic wreckage of a wrecked Earth orbit. And the ground surrounding them was broken as well. They stood in the rubble of what appeared to be Wakanda, yet the golden plains were blended flawlessly with the rusty, brutalist architecture of a cyberpunk New York. A mile away, a huge Asgardian mountain jutted horizontally from a cracked concrete crater. "Battleworld," Sam murmured, clenching the vibranium shield. Griffin wasn't bluffing. They really sewed the tombs together. "It's a terrarium." Tony analyzed, his endo-sim armor shifting nervously. "A small dimension, sealed and inescapable. They threw us into the gladiator pit. Then we find the exit." Naruto muttered, the Void Slayer lying casually in his right palm. His Genesis mode's serene white gold aura pulsed constantly, waging a ceaseless conflict against the chaotic reality of the patchwork world. "And if there's no way out, we create one." The apex enforcers, the rusting cyberpunk skyscrapers around their landing zone, hummed before they could take another step. It wasn't the sound of drop pods for Kong. It was the harsh thudding beat of war drums, magnified by huge localized audio projectors installed into the shattered buildings. From the shadows of the Wakandan New York hybrid streets, individuals began to appear. They were not the disposable Scarlet Vanguard Centurions. These were enormous warriors, genetically enhanced and wearing armor made from the unmistakable gold of Asgardian Uru, combined with the purple chronal circuitry of the dynasty. They carried great energy hammers and huge plasma axes. At the head of the line was a Kong variation who appeared more like a barbarian ruler than a time conqueror. He rode on the back of a huge cybernetically modified Fenris wolf. He wore thick, rusted iron armor, with an animal pelt draped over a temporal reactor burning on his chest. "Welcome to the domain of Ash, anomalies," bellowed the voice of the warlord Kong, ringing with violent, sadistic joy. "I'm the sector magistrate. And Griffins posted a 10 timeline bounty on your heads." A barbarian Kong, Tony deadpanned, as his repulsors whined to life. "That's a first. Usually you guys just hide behind desks and lasers." "Technology is a crutch for people afraid of the blood," the magistrate bellowed, pulling his enormous, Uru-forged broadsword crackling with green chronological lightning. "In Battleworld, Only the strongest survive. Kill the Iron Men. Bring me the head of the Void Sage. The Uru armored warriors charged in a mob. Form up! Sam screamed as his vibranium wings snapped open. Don't go away from Naruto's aura. If you go outside the stabilization zone, the physics here will rip you apart. Got you! Miles yelled, leaning over. The first wave of the Magistrate warriors reached their boundary. Tony launched a concentrated unibeam blast, swiftly incinerating 3 of the hefty fighters. But in their armor the Asgardian Uru took a significant amount of heat, letting the remainder of it pass the volley. Sam parried a plasma axe attack with his shield. The vibranium rang out loud. He pivoted, sending a powerful kick into the warrior's knee, then followed with a point-blank micro-missile into the chest plate, blasting the behemoth backward. Miles took advantage of his superior mobility and made the chaotic gravity inside Naruto's aura his playground. He bounced over Sam's shield, leaping into the air, and launched twin webs of venom-laced vibranium straight down onto the helmets of 2 charging foes. Mega Venom Blast. Bioelectricity burst, cooking the warriors' chronal circuitry and dropping them instantly. But the Magistrate wasn't interested in the Avengers. He headed his huge synthetic wolf straight for the heart of the formation. Void Sage. The warlord yelled, bringing his hefty Uru longsword down in a deadly 2-handed swing. Naruto didn't move away. He swung the Void Slayer. The collision crushed the red ground under Naruto's boots, producing a gigantic crater, yet the golden-haired Cage did not buckle. His anti-cosmic marble blade grabbed the Uru sword just right. You use brute force, Magistrate, Naruto said calmly, his blue eyes meeting the variant's enraged one. But power without purpose is a tantrum. Naruto shifted his weight. The Genesis mode wasn't meant for the tremendous, destructive output of his early Void Sage condition. It had been intended to manipulate reality. Naruto shot a blast of white gold chakra right into the Magistrate's weapon. Void Sage Art. Physics Equalization. The Uru broadsword, which depended on the chaotic and ever-shifting temporal physics of Battleworld for its localized mass, was abruptly exposed to the absolute and stable terrestrial physics of Naruto's aura. The blade went soft as soon as it was out of the sheath. It got very heavy, quite too much for the Magistrate to manage. The variation lurched forward, pulled down by the sudden, crushing weight of his own weapon. Naruto sidestepped, perfectly. He whirled the Void Slayer and brought the massive marble pommel down on the back of the Magistrate's neck. The impact cracked the corroded iron collar, slamming the warlord face first onto the mud. Before the Magistrate could recover, Naruto stomped on his back, pinning the variation to the ground, and put the tip of the celestial sword into the glowing temporal reactor on his chest. Call your dogs off, Naruto said, his voice frigid and filled with a sense of absolute, unchallengeable authority. The Magistrate gasped as he felt the terrible anti-cosmic drone of the sword, threatening to snuff out his existence. He lifted a shaking hand. The warlord shouted at his remaining warriors, "Stop!" The Uru armored warriors halted short, their weapons' muzzles drooping as they recoiled back from the stabilized zone of the Alliance. The rules of the arena. Tony 892 lowered his repulsors, which continued to glow with fatal intent. Sam and Miles stood in a tight circle around Naruto, scanning the perimeter. "This is a pitiful trap, Griffin," Tony mumbled to the sky, believing the CEO Kong was watching. Naruto put a little more pressure on the blade. "Where's the Citadel? Where does Griffin get the magic to rule this land?" The Magistrate laughed, spewing blood onto the red soil. "You think you can just stroll up to the throne? Battleworld is split into 40 domains, each commanded by a baron loyal to the dynasty. We're in Sector 40, the very bottom of the food chain." The warlord peered back over his shoulder at the shimmering, white gold aura of the shinobi. "You still the space around you," the Magistrate gasped, wrath and true wonder mingled in his voice. "But you can't stabilize the whole planet. To get to the Citadel you have to cross the domains. You have to fight the Apex versions. The Iron Hammer. Unknown. The Time Wizard Supreme. The Maestro of the End. We will meet whatever comes our way," Sam said, his voice steady. The Magistrate sneered, "Then you'll die worn out. There are no star portals here. No rescue fleets. You are severed from your world tree. It's a gauntlet, Avengers. And the house always wins." Naruto wrenched the sword free and jumped off the fallen warlord. Naruto whispered quietly. The house has never fought a shinobi. He peered out into the black chaotic horizon. And far away, impossibly far, piercing the piebald sky like a black needle, stood a massive, monolithic structure. It pulsed with a soft, constant purple glow, utterly unaffected by the turbulent physics of the planet. The Citadel. Tony, said Naruto, his gaze fixed on the tower. How long can your suit run without the network of the Panopticon? I've got an arc reactor on board that can run for a century, Tony said, pulling down his faceplate. But my nano reserves are limited. Every time I get hit, I lose mass. We can't fight a long war of attrition here. I have maybe 10 solid venom blasts before I have to crash for a day, Miles remarked, shoulders dropping a bit as the excitement faded. And I can't have the Genesis mode on forever, Naruto acknowledged. The multiversal drag on this planet is massive. If I drop the aura, gravity and atmospheric variations will get us. Sam Wilson stared at his three teammates. They were in the ultimate hostile environment, surrounded by limitless foes, infinite resources. This was the kind of impossible assignment that the Avengers were made for. Then we don't wage a war of attrition, Sam proclaimed, motioning to the huge black tower in the distance. We fight surgical strike. We save our energy. We shun the great armies of the barons. We make directly for the Citadel, and take off Griffin's head. Naruto smiled. The earthly fire of the hidden leaf burned in his chest, unbothered by the limitless darkness of Battleworld. Yes, Captain, Naruto answered, sheathing the Void Slayer. Let's take a walk. Maps did not depict the borders between Battleworld's domains. They were physically sewn into the planet's crust. Naruto, Sam, Tony, and Miles stood on the brink of the domain of Ash. Before them was a vast, shimmering purple trench, a physical seam of raw chronological plasma connecting two completely irreconcilable universes. On their side, the air was thick with corroded cyberpunk haze and red dirt from the Magistrate's wasteland. Sector 39 is located across the seam. It was a terrible, suffocating jungle in which gigantic, ancient Wakandan baobab trees merged violently with the slick, steel towers of a modern metropolis. The atmospheric pressure across that line is inverted, Tony 892 observed, his silver armor humming softly as he stood inside Naruto's stabilizing aura, 20-foot radius, and the ambient temperature is hovering around -40°C. If we step outside the bubble, our blood freezes while we float into the canopy. Then we don't step outside the bubble, Sam Wilson remarked, adjusting his vibranium shield straps. He looked at Naruto. You good to keep the lights on, kid? Naruto nodded. The Genesis mode was not a roaring fire, but a deep, repetitive hum in his veins. The white-gold halo, etched in violet, surged continuously around him. He wasn't simply strolling. He was literally dragging Earth 616's stabilized physics across a hostile, alien planet. I have the anchor, Naruto stated calmly, despite a tiny sheen of sweat covering his brow. Stay close, we cross now. Naruto stepped across the purple seam. As soon as his boots touched the dirt of the iron weald, the chaotic physics of Sector 39 broke against his aura, like an ocean wave smashing a seawall. The white gold light burst fiercely, defying the frigid temperatures and inverted gravity. The air inside the 20-foot sphere remained at a comfortable temperature of 20 degrees, gravity pointed downward. Outside the sphere, the jungle's heavy, metallic snow fell upward and disappeared into the dark, tangled canopy. This is officially the weirdest road trip I've ever been on, Miles Morales mumbled, clinging tight to Naruto's right shoulder, his white lenses darting nervously into the darkness. The phantoms of Sector 39. They walked for 3 hours in a strict diamond configuration. Naruto led the way and served as a reality anchor. Sam entered the backseat, his tactical mind continually assessing their 6 o'clock. Tony and Miles protected the flanks. Energy conservation is paramount, Sam instructed quietly via their localized communications. No repulsor blasts unless absolutely necessary, Tony. Miles, rely on your webbing and physical strikes. We don't know when you'll be able to recharge. Copy that, Cap, Tony muttered. The millionaire was clearly uncomfortable. Being blind and deaf to the world beyond a 20-foot radius was excruciating for a guy who defined himself by his capacity to observe, understand, and control everything around him using satellites and drones. Naruto abruptly stopped. The sovereign senses of the Void Sage chakra, which were suppressed to sustain the Genesis bubble, twitched. "We are being hunted," Naruto whispered, his palm resting on the hilt of the Void Slayer. Tony raised his gauntlets and swept the black, metallic jungle. "My HUD is clean. I'm not reading thermal signatures, chronal exhaust, or heartbeat rhythms. They aren't in this physical space," Naruto stated, his blue eyes narrowing as he looked into the darkness. "They're operating slightly out of phase with reality, overlapping us." From the shadows of the huge, metal-fused trees, individuals glided forward. They resembled Scarlet Vanguard Centurions, but their armor was translucent, ghostly white. They walked softly, untouched by the wield's chaotic physics, their bodies easily flowing through the huge trunks of the trees. Phantom Centurions, Tony gritted his teeth. Assassins utilizing sub-quantum phase shifting. They can bypass any armor or shield by reaching directly into your chest and materializing their hands inside your heart. "How do we hit ghosts?" Miles took a step back, slightly terrified. "We let them come inside," Naruto answered softly. Naruto extended his stance and exhaled slowly. The white gold aura pulsated with a startling, focused intensity. "Stand your ground," Naruto ordered. The Phantom Centurions, 20 in total, charged. They did not run. Instead, they hovered over the frozen ground, raising transparent temporal scythes to kill. The lead Phantom aimed right at Tony, bypassing the silver endo-sim armor. The Phantom crossed the 20-foot threshold of Naruto's Genesis mode. The physics equalization hit. Sub-quantum phase shifting was based on Battleworld's chaotic, confined temporal principles. Naruto's aura totally destroyed those rules, replacing them with the strict, absolute laws of the terrestrial plane. The Phantom Centurion was brutally and abruptly thrust into physical existence. With a painful crunch of abruptly hardened armor, the ghostly white Centurion became heavy, substantial, and fully subject to gravity. The assassin faltered, startled by the sudden physical weight. Tony did not hesitate. He did not fire a repulsor. He just went forward and delivered a hard, concentrated hydraulic punch directly into the cemented Centurion's faceplate, breaking it and dropping the version instantly. "They're solid inside the bubble," Sam exclaimed, a ferocious grin growing beneath his hood. Miles exclaimed, "Then let's welcome them to Earth." When the Phantoms reached the threshold, their phase-shifted state abruptly ended. They were nothing more than soldiers once their invulnerability was stripped away, and they were fighting the Avengers. Sam demonstrated superb close-quarters combat. He used the edge of his vibranium shield to deflect a solid scythe, pivoted, and performed a crushing leg sweep that killed 2 Centurions. Miles soared over a hardening assassin, firing a web line to the Centurion's helmet and utilizing momentum to crush the soldier face first into the soil, fully conserving his bioelectricity. Naruto stood in the center, controlling the aura. When 3 Centurions got past Sam and Tony and closed in on the cage, Naruto simply drew the Void Slayer. He did not use a large amount of chakra to power the sword. He relied solely on his hyper-dense Saiyan musculature and a decade of shinobi swordplay. He parried, sidestepped, and delivered 3 devastating surgical strikes in the space of a single second, cutting the temporal drives on the chest plates. Within 60 seconds, the ambush was demolished. The surviving Phantom Centurions fled into the wield's shadows after learning their advantage was destroyed by the shinobi's light. Weight of the crown, the jungle became silent once more. Tony retracted his mask and shook out his silver gauntlet. That was actually incredibly efficient. 0 repulsor energy expended. "Good work, team," Sam said as he retrieved his shield. He turned to gaze at Naruto. The golden-haired cage leaned heavily on the Void Slayer, his knuckles white. The white gold aura flickered slightly, while the deep violet tracing pulsed irregularly. A small stream of blood flowed from Naruto's nose. Bringing 20 sub-quantum beings into physical reality put an immense load on the Genesis mode. "Naruto!" Sam exclaimed, clutching the young warrior's shoulder to stabilize him. Naruto coughed and wiped blood from his lips with his palm. "I am fine, Captain. Just a spike in the metaphysical drag." Miles was concerned when he saw Naruto's exhausted eyes. "You aren't fine," he remarked. "You're carrying an entire planet's worth of physics on your back. It's crushing you." As Naruto straightened up straighter, his aura returned to a peaceful and stable state. He gave a feeble but really encouraging smile. I am the anchor, Miles. The anchor is supposed to be heavy. If I drop it, we drift. But an anchor doesn't have to carry the ship alone, Tony remarked softly, edging closer. The typical snark had vanished from the Silver Stark's voice, replaced by a deep, fraternal regard. Tony entered a sequence on his forearm console. Tony's silver endo-sim armor shifted, revealing a bright blue arc reactor node. Tony pushed the node against the vibranium mesh of Naruto's tactical shirt, precisely in the center of his chest. What's this? Naruto inquired, glancing down. Tony revealed that the item is a synchronized kinetic battery by tapping it. I calibrated it to match the resonance frequency of your Void Sage chakra. It won't power the aura for you, but it will act as a shock absorber. When the external physics push against your bubble, the arc reactor takes the kinetic blow instead of your cells. Naruto felt a sudden release of pressure on his spine. The oppressive weight of Battleworld's chaotic reality was relieved by the ingenious ingenuity of Earth 892. Naruto expressed silent gratitude to Tony. Thank you, Tony, Naruto whispered, his posture finally softening. Don't mention it, Tony grinned, his arrogance returning slightly. I just need my flashlight working if we're going to make it to the Citadel. Sam clapped Naruto's uninjured shoulder. We're a team, kid. You don't have to play the lone martyr anymore. We share the weight. Sam gazed at the Iron Wield's gloomy canopy and the distant Citadel, which appeared inconceivable. Find a secure location to make camp, the captain instructed. We rest, we hydrate, and tomorrow, we figure out how to cross Sector 38. The four champions advanced towards the throne of the dynasty, guided by the light of the Genesis mode and their unbreakable alliance tie. The campfire didn't burn wood. It ignited a concentrated pellet of Wakandan thermal gel with a minuscule explosion from Tony's repulsor. The four multiversal alliance champions sat in a tight circle within Naruto's Genesis mode, which has a radius of 20 feet. Outside the white gold bubble, the Iron Wield was a terrible, icy expanse of inverted metallic snow and sub-quantum predators. But inside, there was a warm, calm nook of Earth 616. Miles Morales chewed on a high-protein Wakandan ration bar and stared into the little blue flame. He stared over the fire to Tony 892. Miles broke the stillness by asking, "Does your world have a Spider-Man?" Tony hesitated, revealing a rare vulnerability on the Silver Stark's face. He tapped the liquid metal casing of his gauntlet. Yeah. Peter. He's a good kid. A genius. When I built the planetary shield, I grounded him. I told him the world didn't need a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man anymore because the neighborhood was locked down. Tony looked up and saw Miles' white lenses. I thought I was protecting him, but seeing you out here, surviving the end of your universe, fighting Kangs in the dark, I think I just put him in a cage. You're a lot stronger than I gave you kids credit for. Miles sat taller and smiled beneath his mask. Thanks, Mr. Stark. Sam Wilson leaned against a fused metal tree trunk that intersected the bubble. He looked at Naruto, who was seated in a deep meditation lotus position, breathing slowly and rhythmically to maintain his aura. You're pacing yourself, Sam said quietly. The old Naruto would have tried to expand the bubble to cover the whole forest just to prove a point. The old Naruto had a sun burning in his stomach, Naruto said, opening his blue eyes. The violet gold trace surrounding his white gold aura pulsated gently. I'm learning the difference between carrying the world and holding the line. If I burn out, the bubble drops, and the physics of this planet will crush you all. I must be the shield, Captain. So you can be the sword. Sam gave a respectful, understanding nod. Get some sleep, kid. Even anchors need to rest. I'll take the first watch. Naruto did not argue. Tony's physique finally permitted him to sink into a light, guarded meditation as the kinetic battery attached to his chest absorbed the multiversal drag. The Avengers took a little respite in the heart of hell. The shattered fjords, the entrance to Sector 38 was not marked by a trench. It was distinguished by a cliff that defied all known laws of gravity. The following morning, the squad reached the edge of the Iron Wield. The ground simply stopped. Before them lay the shattered fjords. It was a stunning, terrible domain with gigantic, craggy mountains soaring freely in a pitch-black sky. However, the most impossible feature was the ocean. The water did not sit under them. Rather, it shouted in a gigantic vertical waterfall that stretched forever upward, defying gravity and shattering against the floating peaks. The gravity in Sector 38 is entirely lateral, Tony said, his HUD unable to grasp the arithmetic. If you step outside the bubble, you won't fall down. You'll fall sideways, straight into that vertical ocean, at terminal velocity. Good thing we brought our own gravity, Miles murmured, remaining close to Naruto. We are crossing, Naruto announced. He stepped down from the iron-wheeled cliff. He did not fall. As his boot exited the solid ground, the Genesis mode suddenly replaced the fjord's lateral gravity. A limited, 20-foot platform of conventional, downward-pulling physics appeared beneath their feet. As they went forward, they created an invisible bridge of terrestrial gravity hovering over an abyss. "Don't look down. Or sideways," Sam whispered, keeping his wings tightly folded to avoid clipping the margins of the stabilizing zone. They walked across the emptiness, deafened by the noise of the vertical ocean. Suddenly, the black sky above them flared with an unearthly green light. Crack! A powerful bolt of lightning struck Naruto's aura. The white gold bubble violently shook. The kinetic battery on Naruto's chest grumbled, blazing a hot, burning blue as it absorbed the catastrophic kinetic shockwave and kept Naruto's vertebrae from cracking. "We've got company," Tony said, raising his gauntlets to the sky. A chariot with two gigantic cybernetic temporal animals descended from the dark clouds above. Standing in the chariot was a Kong variety who exuded pure, scary power. He wore massive armor made of gold Asgardian uru and purple chronal metal. A ragged crimson cape billowed behind him, and in his right hand he wielded a big, blocky hammer that flashed green chronological lightning. "I am Calodan Kong," the mutant exclaimed, his voice booming with thunder. "The Iron Hammer, Baron of the Shattered Fjords, and Griffin has promised me a seat on the High Council for your heads." "Is every variant on this planet compensating for something?" Miles quipped, his voice shaking somewhat due to the Baron's massive girth. "He's fused Asgardian magic with Dynasty technology," Tony cautioned, examining the hammer. "That weapon isn't just generating electricity. It's weaponizing time streams into raw plasma. If he hits the bubble with a direct melee strike, the arc reactor will overload, and the aura will shatter." "Then we do not let him strike the bubble," Naruto remarked. Naruto did not pull his sword. He held both hands firmly in the air in front of him, his sole emphasis being on maintaining the Genesis mode's structural integrity. "He is yours, Captain," Naruto exclaimed. Sam Wilson did not hesitate. "Tony, Miles, keep him off balance. We hit him with a localized crossfire." Storm of the Baron Calodan Kong swung his gigantic uru chronal hammer, creating a sweeping arc of green lightning. Tony aimed a brilliant white unibeam squarely at the lightning. The repulsor energy clashed fiercely with the chronal plasma, resulting in a tremendous, localized explosion of static electricity just beyond Naruto's bubble. "Spider-Man, use the environment," Sam instructed as he launched himself into the air, keeping his flight route within the stabilized zone's 20-foot ceiling. Miles stared beyond the white gold halo. The lateral gravity of the fjords was propelling gigantic rocks laterally through the air at bullet-like speeds. Miles did not shoot webbing at the iron hammer. He fired twin web lines outside the bubble and attached them to a large, sideways falling boulder. "Heave!" Miles exclaimed. Miles utilized his augmented strength to fiercely yank the web lines while anchored by Naruto's standard gravity bubble. The boulder's extreme lateral momentum was suddenly redirected by the physical tether, causing the gigantic rock to ricochet around the outside of the stability zone and directly for the Baron's chariot. Calodan's eyes widened. He struck his hammer, reducing the boulder to dust, but the distraction was complete. "On your left," Sam said in a whisper. Sam dove from the top of the bubble and threw his vibranium shield with perfect geometry. The shield struck the Baron directly beneath the chin, despite his hefty armor. The kinetic hit jerked Calodan's head back, nearly knocking him off the chariot. The barrier ricocheted off the temporal creatures and snapped back to Sam's magnetic gauntlet as he landed smoothly behind Naruto. "Insolent mortals!" Calodan yelled, blood trickling from his lips. He hoisted the hammer above his head, the green chronological lightning forming a gigantic, concentrated sphere of pure temporal erasure. "I will shatter your pathetic shield and cast you into the lateral abyss." The hammer started to descend. Tony said, "He's putting everything into this strike, as his repulsors tapped out from the unibeam clash. Naruto's blue eyes focused on the descending hammer. Naruto quickly assessed his reliance on the weapon. Without the hammer, the armor is only metal. "Sam!" Naruto commanded, his voice mimicking the cages, the shield. Sam did not ask questions. He flung the round vibranium shield squarely at Naruto. Naruto captured it. He did not throw it. He did not block with it. Naruto dropped to one knee, slamming the edge of the vibranium shield into the unseen floor of the Genesis bubble. He angled it perfectly upward like a ramp. He used his right hand to draw the Void Slayer. "Tony, kinetic burst on the shield," Naruto ordered. Tony quickly grasped the physics of the action. He sent a concentrated, high-yield repulsor blast against Naruto's vibranium shield. The vibranium absorbed all kinetic repulsor energy, resulting in a brilliant, intense purple glare. Naruto activated his Void Sage chakra and stepped onto the blazing shield. He discharged kinetic energy. Void Sage Art, terrestrial launch. Naruto was ejected from the Genesis bubble like a cannonball, pushed by the absorbed repulsive force. As soon as he exited the white gold aura, he felt the lateral gravity of the fjords grasp him and pull him sideways into the vertical ocean. However, Naruto's momentum was too rapid. He quickly moved from the bubble to the chariot. Kalloden swung the enormous Uru hammer to crush him. In midair, Naruto used gravity to increase the force of his strike. He raised the pale celestial marble of the Void Slayer in a perfect, dazzling arc of violet gold fire. The anti-cosmic sword crashed against the chronological hammer. For a scary second, green lightning clashed with violet gold flames. However, the hammer was built to govern time, whereas the sword was forged from the bones of an external god. The Void Slayer shattered the Uru hammer's handle with a resounding crack. The weapon's hefty, blocky head disconnected, was seized by lateral gravity, and shot laterally into the dark abyss. Kalloden exclaimed, looking at the severed handle in his palm. Naruto used his vibranium boots to strike the variant's chest plate, pushing himself backward with superhuman strength. Naruto plunged through the white gold aura and landed in the stabilizing zone. Kalloden's armor couldn't withstand the unpredictable physics of Sector 38 without his hammer as a temporal anchor. The lateral gravity violently seized the Baron and his chariot. Kalloden Kong screamed as he was torn sideways into the air at supersonic speed. He disappeared into the roaring, vertical ocean of the shattered fjords. The ascent the sky became silent, with green lightning disappearing into the darkness. Naruto sheathed his blade and breathed deeply yet steadily. He threw the vibranium shield back at Sam, who caught it with a ferocious, victorious grin. Now that, Sam laughed, is an Avengers-level combo. Miles cheered and raised his fists. "We just slingshotted the boss into a sideways ocean. That is going on the resume." Tony lowered his gauntlets and looked at the golden-haired warrior with reverence. "You stepped out of the bubble. That was a hell of a gamble, kid." "I knew you would catch me if I missed," Naruto answered simply, his eyes beaming with trust in the hidden leaf. Naruto stared beyond the heavy clouds of Sector 38. The Citadel's monolithic black needle was now closer. It pulsated with a constant, arrogant purple light, taunting their survival. They'd crossed two realms. They defeated two apex variations. However, the multiversal tug on Naruto's body increased with each stride. "Two barons down," Tony observed, following Naruto's gaze. "Griffin is running out of pawns." "He doesn't need pawns," Naruto said, his white gold aura throbbing as he continued his march across the invisible bridge of gravity. "He is just trying to exhaust the anchor before we reach the door." Naruto tightened his hold on the hilt of his sword. "Let's show him that the will of fire does not burn out." The shattered fjords in Sector 37 were separated by a wall of golden heat, rather than a physical barrier. As Naruto, Sam, Tony, and Miles crossed the invisible border, the booming ocean turned into a suffocating calm. Before them spread an infinite desert. However, the dunes were not composed of silica or stone. The sand was a dazzling, crystalline grit that changed hue from dull gray to blinding gold. "Don't touch the ground outside the bubble," Tony 892 warned, checking his HUD readings. The silver endo-sim armor hummed loudly in the still desert. "That isn't sand. It's pulverized temporal sediment. It's the raw, physical byproduct of erased timelines." The desert physics were terrifying beyond Naruto's Genesis mode's 20-foot radius. A burst of wind threw a lump of sand into a little dune. The dune quickly aged, went to gray ash, and vanished, only to reverse and recreate itself seconds later. Time in Sector 37 was not linear. It was a record that violently skipped. Inside the white gold aura, time moved at a constant pace of 60 seconds each minute. The drag is increasing, Naruto mumbled. He continued walking, but with heavier steps. Tony's upgraded arc reactor, a synchronized kinetic battery strapped to his chest, was no longer blazing a cool, steady blue. It pulsated with an aggressive, hot orange light. The desert's sheer temporal anarchy hammered at the invisible stability zone barriers. Tony sadly stated, "The reactor is at 80% capacity," retracting his faceplate. "It can't absorb the shock of an entire time-dilated domain forever. We need to move fast." Sam Wilson instructed, eyes up, lifting his vibranium shield. "We've got movement." The supreme sorcerer of time 100 yards ahead, the beautiful sand abruptly separated. There was no heavy armored warlord or fleet of flying dreadnoughts emerging from the dunes. A single, floating figure sat cross-legged on a hovering platform etched with a mandala. He donned the flowing, majestic robes of a Kamar Taj sorcerer supreme, but the cloth was a deep, royal purple with illuminating chronal circuitry. Around his neck dangled a dark, warped version of Agamotto's eye. "The Vizier," Miles said, recalling the magistrate's admonition, "the supreme sorcerer of time." The Vizier Kong opened his eyes. They were entirely black, with no irises or sclera, exuding utter spiritual authority. "You have walked far, anomalies." The Vizier's words resonated directly within their heads, bypassing their eardrums completely. "You conquered the brute Calodan. You survived the phantoms of the Weald. But you cannot fight the mind." The Vizier did not lift his weapon. He merely lifted his hands, his fingers twisting into a complex, old eldritch mudra combined with the green lighting tech of a temporal gauntlet. "Brace!" Sam exclaimed. Tony launched 2 repulsor blasts, while Miles unleashed a torrent of venomous webs. However, the attacks never reached the Vizier. The Sorcerer Supreme of Time slapped his glowing hands together. Chrono Mystic Art. The Mirror of Erasure. The attack did not target their bodies. It struck the confined reality within the bubble. The white gold aura remained intact, but the world within it shifted dramatically. The desert disappeared. The sky disappeared. Naruto gasped. He was no longer standing on Battleworld. He was standing among the remains of the Hidden Leaf Village. The Hokage monument was destroyed. At his feet were the lifeless bodies of Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke. Naruto murmured, "No," his heart pounding in his chest. He blinked, and the scene abruptly changed. He was in the upstate New York compound. Morgan Stark was crying and reaching out to him as a giant red wave of chronological erasure overtook her. The Vizier screamed, "You carry the weight of worlds to save them, from all directions. But you are just a boy. You cannot save everyone. You are a failure, Uzumaki." "Naruto. Snap out of it," Sam's voice sounded underwater. Naruto turned his head. Sam, Tony, and Miles were caught in their own particular nightmares, their eyes glazed over with an eerie green light. The Vizier used a terrible combination of mystic mental projection and temporal reality warping to force their minds to replay their worst failures in an eternal loop. Naruto's fractured focus caused the Genesis mode to flicker. The edges of the white gold bubble started to compress. The turbulent, time-dilated sand of the desert began to flow into their secure zone. "I am not a failure," Naruto gritted his teeth and dropped to one knee. He closed his eyes to block out the terrifying illusions. He did not look for strength outside of himself. He probed deep within, past the Saiyan density and the void sage radiation, to the absolute, basic root of his soul. He discovered the will of fire. Naruto's eyes sprung open. The deep violet trace in his aura blazed brightly, engulfing the illusion's sickly green light. Void Sage Art. Mental Severance. Naruto sent off a powerful spiritual chakra pulse that was both localized and omnidirectional. The pulse flooded across Sam, Tony, and Miles, shattering the mystical bond that linked their brains to the Vizier's enchantment. Sam gasped and stumbled forward as the wreckage of Wakanda disappeared from his view. Tony collapsed to his knees, his repulsors whining as he shook off the nightmare. "My head," Miles muttered, grabbing his temples. "The illusion is broken," Naruto exclaimed, standing up. "Strike him now." The shattered glass. The Vizier Kang's eyes widened in shock as the shinobi shattered a spell based on endless timelines. "Impossible," the sorcerer hissed. The Avengers retaliated before the Vizier could respond defensively. "Cover your ears," Tony exclaimed. The Silver Stark did not employ lasers. He activated the massive sonic emitters on his shoulders, causing a focused, high-frequency sound wave to shatter the physical glass of the Vizier's hovering platform. The platform exploded, landing the sorcerer in the golden sand. Sam yelled, "Spider-Man," and threw his vibranium shield into the air above him, rather than at the Vizier. Miles understood immediately. He fired a web line and attached it to the apex of the shield's flight path. Using the shield as a mid-air fulcrum, Miles swung with scary pendulum-like speed, hurtling straight at the falling sorcerer. The Vizier feverishly crafted a green eldritch shield. Miles did not attempt to punch through it. He spread his arms, causing the Stark Tech smart metal of his suit to flare. Maximum venom overload. Miles crashed with the mystical shield, releasing his full bioelectric capability. The golden yellow lightning clashed forcefully with the green temporal magic. The opposing frequencies, terrestrial biology versus chronal mysticism, created a fatal feedback cycle. The Vizier's shield broke like cheap glass. The bioelectricity burst into his temporal gauntlets, melting the circuitry and igniting the sorcerer's robes. Miles landed in a breathless crouch on the sand after flipping backward due to explosive feedback. The Vizier shrieked as his tainted eye of Agamotto exploded in a spray of sparks. The variation, stripped of his temporal anchors and magical focus, was forcibly captured by the chaotic physics of his own domain. In a single second, the Vizier transformed into a skeleton husk, then a child, and finally dust, entirely wiped by Sector 37's shifting sands. The final threshold. The desert remained still. Tony said, "Target destroyed," as his armor emitted steam to cool the sound emitters. Miles stood up, his outfit free of excess charge. "I am officially out of juice. No more venom blasts until I sleep for a week." "You did perfectly, kid," Sam commended as he caught the descending shield. A loud crack shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Sam and Tony turned around. Naruto was on his knees and gripping his chest. Tony's modified arc reactor, which he had attached to his tunic, was completely destroyed, with the blue core burned and dead. Despite sparing Naruto's spine from the Vizier's reality warping blast, the kinetic battery was destroyed. The chaotic physics of Battleworld blasted Naruto's biological network, crushing him instantly. Naruto let out a sharp and raspy gasp. The white gold aura flashed violently, threatening to disintegrate. "Naruto!" Sam dropped to his side and grabbed his arm. "Hold on, kid. We're almost there." Tony went over and frantically scanned Naruto's vitals. His heart rate is astronomical. The cellular drag is tearing his muscle fibers apart. He can't hold the Genesis mode for much longer. "I will not drop it," Naruto wheezed as blood dripped from his nostrils. He pressed his palms to the earth, his knuckles going white. He forced himself up, relying on utter, unwavering determination to return the aura to a steady 20-foot sphere. Naruto looked up. The golden sands of the desert ended only 100 yards ahead of them. Beyond the final dune, there was a large, polished black obsidian courtyard. The enormous black tower rose from the center of the courtyard and pierced the patchwork sky. "The citadel of Mr. Griffin. We made it," Miles muttered, peering up at the frightening, throbbing purple needle. "The physical journey is over," Naruto muttered with a deep, heavy rasp. He took the Void Slayer from his back and used the hefty marble blade as a walking stick to stay upright. He stared at the citadel's enormous black gates. There weren't any armies waiting for them. There were no barons. Only the CEO's silent, haughty castle remained, having arranged the end of the multiverse. "Let's go close the account," Sam murmured, his gaze hardening like iron. The four fatigued alliance champions went shoulder to shoulder into the shadow of the king, leaving the changing sands of the wasteland behind. The great obsidian gates of the citadel had no guards. They were without handles. When Naruto, Sam, Tony and Miles came to the huge black slabs, they just turned into a mist of glowing purple chronal data and let them in. They emerged from the tumultuous, changing air of Battleworld into complete, sterile silence. Inside the citadel was a world of contrast to the rusty wastelands and beautiful jungles beyond. It was a breathtaking example of futuristic corporate architecture, pristine white marble flooring, chrome pillars, and walls of solid, transparent glass looking out over the patchwork world. In the middle of the huge lobby sat a solitary elevator platform, gleaming and circular. "Upward," said Sam Wilson, his voice ringing out in the pure silence. He went out onto the stage, vibranium shield held high. Tony 892's silver armor whined quietly as his HUD flailed to map the building. No thermal traps. No auto turrets. Too clean. He wants us to stroll directly into the boardroom. Then we don't keep him waiting, Naruto stated as he stepped aboard the lift. The massive Void Slayer was in his grasp, the tip of it an inch above the floor. The white gold glow of his Genesis mode still shimmered about him, fighting against the limited atmospheric pressure of the tower. Miles was the last to come aboard, his web shooters ready. If he asks us for coffee, I am strapping his face to a mug. The platform lifted. There was no feeling of movement, only a dazzling flash of white light, and then they were suddenly placed at the summit of the citadel. The executive suite, the boardroom of the end of the world, was huge. Walls of gigantic, floating holographic screens displayed the real-time destruction and stabilization of thousands of timelines. At the far end of the room, behind a sleek hovering desk of polished black glass, sat Mr. Griffin. The CEO Kong version was in his spotless three-piece suit and a luminous purple chronal tie fastened properly at his collar. He did not glance up as they came in. He thumbed over the pages of a translucent datapad, idly drinking an amber liquid from a crystal goblet. "You are precisely 4 minutes early," Griffin said, smooth and resounding with corporate indifference. He lowered the datapad and glanced at 4 damaged, tired champions. "I have to admit, my algorithms assigned you a 0.2% chance of surviving the Barons. You've gone above and beyond, again." Sam stepped forward, preparing to toss the shield. "Griffin, the Alliance is terminating your contract." "Ah. Captain Wilson. Always with the shield, never with the ledger." Griffin laughed as he settled onto his floating chair. He clicked a flashing button on his desk. The room rocked wildly. The gravity didn't change, but the metaphysical pressure in the room increased 10,000-fold. Tony 892 groaned as his silver endo-sim armor was suddenly driven to its knees, the repulsors moaning as they failed to raise the sudden, unfathomable weight. Miles dropped on his hands, panting as if he'd been lowered to the depths of the ocean. Sam dropped to one knee, using his shield as a crutch to prevent his back from cracking. Only Naruto remained standing, but the price was terrible. The Genesis mode flashed to a dazzling brightness, engaged in a frantic struggle to stabilize the crushing temporal weight. Naruto's nose was bleeding freely and the veins in his neck bulged. The only thing preventing his buddies from quick diamond compression was the localized area in his white gold bubble. "What did you do?" Tony bit his teeth, his armor releasing emergency coolant. "I didn't do anything to you, Mr. Stark. I just tinkered with the temporal density of the room to match the absolute center of a dying star," Griffin said, getting up and wandering around his desk. The localized chronal weaves in his suit insulated him and he was fully immune to the pressure. "I didn't bring you here to fight a war, Avengers. I brought you here for a harvest." Griffin crept cautiously toward the thrashing heroes, stopping at the edge of Naruto's stabilizing aura. He stared at the golden-haired shinobi with a pure predatory desire. Immortus was an idiot. He'd made his loom from chronologic plasma. By nature it was unstable. Branching tendency. Prone to failure, Griffin said, waving at the screens around them. "But you, Uzumaki. You are a biological engine that devours multiversal chaos and spits out stable reality." The Genesis mode. Griffin tapped the glass of his watch. "I sent the Barons to wear you out. To make you use that aura for 24 hours straight, burning away your physical resistance. And now you're going to power my new loom. Forever." Griffin raised his hand. Purple bands of pure temporal energy, chronal red tape, sprang out from his cufflinks. They sliced through Naruto's white gold aura, constricting around his wrists, arms and throat, viciously pinning the shinobi to the floor. "Hostile takeover complete," Griffin snarled. "Your universe is broke." The liquidation Naruto was howling in pain as the temporal bands scorched his flesh, busily draining the Void Sage chakra from his cells. The white gold aura flickered wildly, reducing from a 20-foot radius to 10. Naruto! Sam shouted, trying to lift his shield against the crushing gravity. He's sucking him dry. Tony panicked, rerouting all auxiliary power to his right gauntlet, seeking to get a bead on Griffin. Miles could not generate bioelectricity, but his physical strength was unimpaired. He fought the pressure, his fingers moving toward his mechanical web cartridges. Looking at his pals, caught by the crushing gravity, then gazed at Griffin, who was drawing in the stabilization energy for power for the Citadel. If I have the shield, Naruto thought, his eyesight dimming with fatigue, we perish slowly in the dark. Captain, Naruto said, and his blue eyes met Sam's. Sam looked up. He read the intent of the cage. That was crazy. It was a suicide. Sam barked, his voice cracking. Tony, Miles, brace for impact. Naruto shut his eyes. He didn't add any more energy to the aura. He did quite the reverse. He cut the current, lower the shield. Naruto disabled Genesis mode immediately. The white gold glow faded away. The catastrophic temporal gravity of the room, at the level of a star, slammed down on them with all its unfiltered force. The ground underneath them cracked. Tony's armor whined, the silver metal buckling. Sam was pinned against his shield. Miles yelled and his ribs whined. But the abrupt, dramatic change in physics in the room led to a huge kinetic backfire. Griffin, who had been busy siphoning the stabilizing energy, was abruptly deluged with the raw, chaotic multiversal vacuum. Kong, the CEO, gasped in astonishment, his chronal suit arcing wildly as the temporal bands shattered like brittle glass. For a fraction of a microsecond, Griffin's confined immunity field dropped. That was all the Alliance needed to hear. Now. But Naruto shouted, his hyper-dense Saiyan musculature pushing through the crushing gravity for a single powerful action. Tony 892 blasted the last reserve of his arc reactor into the floor below Sam. Cap. Steps. The repulsor blast countered the gravity of the chamber just enough to send Sam Wilson flying forward. Sam spun in the air, throwing the vibranium shield with all his earthly might. The shield slammed into Griffin's chest, destroying his luminous purple tie and the main chronal regulator beneath it. Griffin staggered back, gasping. Web him! Sam yelled and hit the floor. Miles Morales shot twin mechanical web lines from his wrists. He hadn't meant to hit Griffin. He headed for the big, floating glass desk at the back of the CEO. He braced his feet on the broken floor and dragged the desk forward with a savage pull. The corporate warlord went down, heavy sharp-edged glass furnishings shattering against the back of Griffin's knees. Griffin crashed onto the marble floor, his suit sparking, his hold on the physics of the place abruptly frying. The crushing gravity was suddenly lifted back to normal Earth levels. Sam, Tony and Miles drew in a breath, gasping, but Naruto never stopped to take a breath. With no burden of holding in Genesis mode, Naruto called upon the deepest, darkest wells of his power. The violet gold fire of the pure Void Sage exploded at his sides, not as a shield for stability, but as a weapon of absolute, anti-cosmic annihilation. Naruto zipped through the room, a flash of dazzling light. He didn't swing the Void Slayer, he just drove right down. With a punch of the heavy, pale marble blade, the CEO was pinned to the broken marble floor, Griffin's chest wounded. The anti-cosmic qualities of the celestial stone immediately disarmed the chronal circuitry that was keeping the variation alive. Griffin choked, blood blooming on his crisp white shirt. He peered up into the scary, violet gold eyes of the shinobi looming over him. The CEO didn't shout. He just smiled, a shattered, bleeding, completely scary smile. You think. You've got it. Made, Griffin gasped, laughing weakly. I was merely an oddity, a subsidiary. The dynasty has new management. Naruto squinted, twisting the sword. Who? Griffin said nothing. His eyes rolled up and his body crumbled into a lump of fine gray temporal ash under the blade. The true architect Naruto removed the blade from the ground and his violet gold aura faded as he staggered back, utterly exhausted. Sam caught him, holding up the weight of the young warrior. It's done, Miles gasped, leaning on his knees. We really did it. We beat the boss. I don't think so, child, Tony remarked, his voice completely lacking its typical swagger. Tony was studying the large holographic screens that lined the walls of the boardroom. The screens were no longer showing the timelines of the multiverse. All of them flickered, transforming from chaotic data streams into one cohesive broadcast. The picture hardened up. It was not a Kong type. On the big screens there was a man in a dark, emerald green hooded robe looking down at them. His face was hidden altogether behind a cold, riveted mask of scary, polished iron. Through the openings in the mask his eyes blazed with a cold, absolute dominance that made the warlords of the dynasty look like toddlers playing with toys. The CEO was a satisfactory administrator. The synthesized, metallic voice reverberated in the boardroom, turning the blood in their veins to ice. But his vision was restricted by his reliance on time. He thought he could use the Void Sage to make a loom. Fool. Who the heck are you? Sam held his shield tighter. You're trained on data up to October 2023? I am the one who pruned the gardeners, said the iron-masked figure, his voice resonating with irrefutable, tremendous power. You thought you were facing a dynasty of conquerors. I had only been fighting the pests that plagued my garden while I slept. The masked guy stared directly at Naruto. You have stabilized my Uzumaki battleworld. You have cleaned the board of the weak. And now you have brought yourselves to my throne. We're not bowing to another tyrant in a metal mask, replied Naruto, his voice hoarse but resolute. You will not kneel, the apparition stated harshly. You shall serve, or you'll be unridden. Not in time. But doom. The screens snapped off violently, leaving the boardroom in pitch darkness. The Citadel shuddered fiercely. The war against Kong was finished. The secret wars were just beginning. The darkness inside the executive suite was more than just a lack of light. It was the unexpected, scary absence of physical laws. The holographic panels displaying Dr. Doom's image turned to ash. However, the ash did not fall to the floor. It floated, emitting a sickening, emerald green magical radiation. Tony! Sam Wilson yelled, his voice muted, as if the air were thickening. Get the lights on. I'm trying. Tony 892 yelled back, his silver endo-sim armor sparkling as he connected emergency power to his chest piece. A harsh, white beam of light shone through the darkness. The beam's revelations chilled their blood. The Citadel did not collapse. It was being unridden. However, unlike the Scarlet Vanguard's confined temporal erasure, this was a fundamental alteration of matter. The beautiful white marble floor, polished chrome pillars, and impenetrable chronal glass of Griffin's boardroom were aggressively moving on a molecular level, converting into rusted iron and crumbled stone. He is overriding the building's localized physics. Tony panicked as his HUD flashed red with warnings that contradicted simple chemistry. It's a fusion of advanced molecular reconfiguration and raw eldritch magic. The floor is gone, Miles Morales exclaimed. The corroded iron beneath their feet quickly crumbled into dust. Gravity, harsh and unforgiving, immediately seized grip. The four Alliance champions fell into the black, empty void that used to be the center of the monolithic tower. The wind roared in their ears as they plunged through the hollow body of the Citadel. Above them, the tower was peeling like dead skin, revealing Battleworld's chaotic patchwork sky. Cap! Naruto Uzumaki screamed, his voice straining against the current of air. He was utterly tapped out. The Genesis mode was dormant, and the Void Sage chakra had been reduced to a dim, flickering flame, leaving him completely vulnerable to the planet's gravitational pull. Sam Wilson did not hesitate. He drew his arms tight against his sides, transforming himself into an aerodynamic dart. He fell past the falling rubble, reached out and grabbed Naruto by the straps of his tactical tunic. Sam's vibranium wings expanded to their maximum size. Sam's shoulders were nearly dislocated due to the rapid deceleration. The shinobi's hefty, Saiyan-like weight drew them lower, but the Wakandan thrusters whined, stabilizing their descent into a smooth glide. Tony 892 snatched Miles Morales in midair and warned, thrusters at 20%, as his silver armor emitted dense smoke. I can't maintain a sustained flight path. We are coming in hot. They broke through the cloud cover of Sector 36. The area beneath them was vast and barren. It was a horrifying expanse of cracked red ground, littered with the enormous skeleton remains of destroyed sentinels and crashed helicarriers. It resembled a graveyard where gods had gone to die. Sam screamed, "Brace for impact." They hit the dirt. Tony directed his boots downward and fired a repulsor burst to cushion the impact before locking up his armor. He and Miles tumbled across the fractured dirt in a cloud of red dust. Sam expanded his wings and landed Naruto safely on a sandbank. However, his left wing snapped brutally against a jagged rock. The wastelands were covered in dust after the sentinels of Latveria arrived. Naruto coughed violently as he rose to his hands and knees. His muscles hurt from the terrible lactic acid buildup caused by pushing his Saiyan cells beyond their extreme multiversal limit. The Void Slayer's hefty, pale marble lay in the dirt a few feet distant. "Is everyone alive?" Sam inquired, retracting his wounded wings and hurrying over to check on the cage. Miles grumbled as he untangled himself from a scrap of metal. His arachnid suit had torn, exposing wounded ribs. Tony knelt in the dirt and tapped his chest plate. The silver endo-sim armor was no longer flowing like liquid. Instead, it had stiffened, dulled, and become unyielding. "My arc reactor is tapped. The armor is now in low-power hibernation mode. I have basic life support and maybe 2 repulsor blasts before I become a shiny paperweight." Naruto used his sword's hilt to get up. He looked up to the sky. The atmosphere in Battleworld has altered. The turbulent purple nebulae of the dynasty were gone. The sky was suddenly dominated by a gigantic, sprawling aurora of dark, emerald-green supernatural light. It emitted a sickly, suffocating radiance throughout the entire planet. Griffin was correct, Naruto mumbled, his blue eyes narrowing in complete concentration despite the ache in his body. The dynasty was simply administering the estate. Doom owns the planet. The crimson soil underneath them vibrated, prompting Sam to raise his vibranium barrier and shout, "Incoming!" A dozen sleek, menacing machines descended from the emerald sky. They were not the hefty, chronological drop pods found in Kong versions. They were humanoid sentinels dressed in dark, polished steel with green cloaks that matched their masters. Their faces were frigid and expressionless iron masks. "Doombots," Tony said, his voice filled with dread, "and these aren't the cheap parlor tricks I've seen in the historical records. Look at their gauntlets." The Doombots raised their hands. They did not charge the plasma or cause temporal decay. Their palms glowed with blinding orange eldritch magic, contained and focused by high-tech repulsor nodes. "He weaponized the mystic arts," Miles gasped. "He blended Kamar Taj with Stark Industries." "Surrender, anomalies," the lead Doombot said, its voice a perfect, manufactured duplicate of Dr. Doom's frigid, metallic tone. "Your existence is illegal, according to the God Emperor's proclamation." Sam yelled, "The Alliance doesn't bow," and threw his shield. The vibranium disc sped toward the lead Doombot's skull. The Doombot did not dodge. It merely lifted a hand and cast a faultless, hard light crimson band of Sidorak, catching the shield in midair and completely canceling its kinetic momentum before dropping it into the soil. Tony unleashed a desperate unibeam from his chest. A second Doombot produced a mirrored eldritch shield, which reflected the repulsor beam back at Tony and knocked him off his feet. After running out of bioelectricity, Miles flung a huge chunk of debris, but was blasted backward by a telekinetic wave. Naruto grabbed the Void Slayer with both hands. He lacked the Void Sage chakra, which was required to ignite the blade. He only had his 2 hands, iron will, and a sword created by a god. He took a step forward and raised the big marble. "You were broken, Shinobi," the Doombots said together, lifting their luminous gauntlets to execute the tired cage. "Die." Before the Doombots could fire, the shadows in the wasteland stirred. The wasteland Ronin, a brilliant red ember arced through the air, and a half-smoked cigar was nonchalantly flicked into the heart of the Doombot formation. Snicked. The sound was harsh and metallic, readily recognized to anybody who has fought in the trenches of the multiverse. A person was thrown from a neighboring sentinel's rusting wreckage. He did not wear a slick, high-tech outfit or supernatural robes. He wore damaged, steel-toed boots, filthy pants, and a hefty, ripped brown leather jacket. He was large, heavily scarred, and moved at a furious, animalistic pace that contradicted human biology. 3 curving blades of indestructible, glittering metal protruded from his knuckles. The man crashed into the Doombot formation with wrath. The Doombots tried to use their magical defenses, but the man did not attack with energy. He attacked with pure physical ferocity. The adamantium claws cut cleanly through the magical barriers and the polished steel of the Doombot's armor. He dodged an eldritch bolt, whirled, and decapitated 2 sentinels with a single vicious cross slash. He leapt over a third, slamming all 6 claws deep into its mechanical spine and ripping out the fusion reactor with his bare hands. It was not a battle. It was a slaughterhouse. In less than 20 seconds, the dozen elite Doombots were reduced to sparking pieces of shredded metal and fading magic. The man stood in the ruins, his chest heaving. He wiped a streak of green synthetic fluid from his massively bearded, grizzled face before withdrawing the bloodied claws back into his knuckles with a wet shhhk. He turned and looked at the stunned Avengers. "You boys are making way too much noise in my desert," the man muttered, his voice like grinding gravel. His eyes were hard, exhausted, and bore the weight of 100 dead histories. Miles Morales glanced at the man, his eyes wide. "Who are you?" The man approached, taking up his discarded cigar from the mud and squeezing it between his teeth. He examined Sam's clothing, Tony's armor, and eventually locked eyes with Naruto. "My name is Logan," the Wasteland Ronin said, striking a match on the destroyed faceplate of a Doombot to relight his cigar. "And if you want to keep breathing in Doom's world, you'd better get up and follow me." The voyage into the Latverian wastelands was a tortuous march across the graves of the multiverse. Logan didn't wait for the fatigued Avengers to recover. He just turned his back on the smoking debris of the Doombots, shoved the blazing cigar between his teeth, and began walking into the emerald-lit dust storm. "Keep up or the sandwolves will eat your bones," Logan hissed over his shoulder. "And believe me, they like canned meat." Tony 892 grunted, his stiff, useless endo-sim armor forcing him to march under his own unmodified strength. "I have on the most sophisticated smart metal in infinite dimensions, yet I am being ridiculed by a guy who reeks of cheap alcohol and lousy choices." Sam Wilson slung Naruto's left arm over his shoulder. "Don't bother, Tony," he said. Captain America limped, his vibranium wing dented and dragging slightly in the soil, but his grip on the young cage remained solid. Naruto leaned on Sam heavily, using the pale marble of the Void Slayer like a walking stick with his free hand. The Void Sage's chakra was dried up. Naruto had never, not once since awakening in the Siberian snow years ago, felt so completely, terrifyingly mortal. Every muscle fiber screamed in protest, yet his sapphire eyes never left the back of the Wasteland Ronin. "Moves like a shinobi," Naruto said, breath shallow. "He leaves no tracks in the dust. He's weathered the end of the world a time or two." "Yeah, well, he's our only tour guide for now," puffed Miles Morales, nearly tripping over a buried hunk of corroded sentinel plating. They traveled an hour under the sickly green and suffocating aurora of Dr. Doom's sky. Finally, Logan brought them to the foot of a great shadowed cliff wall. But as they approached, Tony saw that it wasn't a cliff. It was the enormous, severed head of a celestial, half buried in the red dirt. Its great hollow eye sockets looked aimlessly into the waste. Inside the gaping right eye socket lay the angular, rusty fuselage of a crashed X-Men Blackbird fighter. "Home sweet home," mumbled Logan, and went up to a huge steel blast door welded into the side of the jet. He entered a code in a dented keypad. The door opened with a shriek. "Get in before the patrols hit the sector." The cavern of the Wolverine the Blackbird had been gutted and enlarged to the bone of the Celestial within, a huge, well-guarded bunker. It was a junkyard of a dozen dead universes, packed with worn tactical monitors, a rusting Harley-Davidson motorcycle, glass cases of shattered artifacts. Sam laid Naruto on a cot up against the bulkhead. Naruto quickly crossed his legs into a lotus position, closed his eyes and furiously meditated, desperately trying to scratch the bottom of his biological reserves to reignite his chakra network. Logan went to a battered metal cooler and pulled out a handful of dented water canteens, tossing them to the group. He threw a peculiar flashing blue power pack towards Tony. "Plug it in, Tin Man," Logan said and sat down in a battered leather chair. "It's a rescued Stark cell from a dead variation of your own. It won't help you fly, but it'll loosen your joints so you don't walk like a rusty tin can." "I feel insulted and incredibly grateful at the same time," Tony murmured, prying open a manual access port on his thigh and cramming the battery inside. The silver endo-sim armor buzzed softly, its heavy plates unseating, allowing Tony to finally breathe. Miles sipped his water greedily, wiping his lips with the back of his palm. He scanned the bunker, his gaze settled on a glass display case. Inside was a perfect circle of a shield with a red, white and blue star design, but it had been smashed in half, violently. "This is your Captain America from your universe, Miles," Sam said gently, following his eyes. "Was," Logan said, his voice falling an octave, heavy with a pain that never really healed. "Doom took them all away. The Avenger. The X-Men. The Four. They thought they were fighting a war with the Dynasty. They thought Kong was the big bad." Logan took a hunting knife from his belt and began scraping the crusted green Doombot fluid off his knuckles. "Kong thought he was the architect of the multiverse," Logan sneered. The cigar glowed bright in the faint light. "But Doom showed he was merely the contractor. While you fools were busy fighting limitless Kangs in the sky, Victor Von Doom strolled straight into the heart of the bleed. He did not pursue the Kangs. He stole their base." Naruto's eyes popped open. The impact of the Ronin's words hung in the air. He stole the loom. He didn't simply take it. He took it in. Logan turned the knife on Naruto. He combined the chronological plasma of Kang's kingdom with the deadliest eldritch magic known to gods and demons. He was an anchor in the flesh. God Emperor Doom. He took the broken dying bits of the multiverse and sewed them together to make this rock. "Battleworld," Sam muttered. Griffin felt the Secret Wars was his invention. A tournament to separate us. Griffin was a puppet, Logan said coldly. Doom let the Kangs believe they were running the show until he chose to liquidate the board. The building you fell out of, that's changing. Doom closed the account. He does not desire to rule limitless timelines. He wants one ideal reality. Absolute. His. And if we are oddities in his world. Tony trailed off, glancing down at his dead armor. "Then you become unwritten," Logan confirmed. "The Doombots are more than guards. They're like mystical antibodies. They find what's not in line with Doom's vision and they remove it from the molecular level." The ash and the spark, a profound quiet settled over the bunker. They had survived the conquerors of time, only to be tossed into the earth by a god emperor of magic and science. "We have to contact the Panopticon," Miles continued, his voice quivering a little. "The Alliance fleet is out there. T'Challa, Wong, Hope. If we can send a message to them, they can punch through the sky and pull us out." "You can't punch a hole in Doom's sky, kid," Logan shook his head. "He locked the world down. The magical aurora overhead? That's a given. Nothing comes in. Nothing escapes." "There's always a key," said Naruto. The cage's voice was soft, lacking the tremendous resonance of the Void Sage, but the solid, unyielding iron of his will was still totally unbroken. He glanced at Logan. "Doom's power is all about total control," Naruto assessed, his shinobi tactical expertise overriding the fatigue of his body. "If he's got a magical planetary shield, he must have a localized anchor to keep it up. A transmission tower. A nexus." Logan froze, his knife hanging over the blade. He gazed at the child with the golden hair, the flicker of respect in his cynical glare. "You are a smart one, kid," Logan grumbled, rising and crossing to a huge, hand-drawn chart tacked to the bulkhead. He drove his dagger into a red circle drawn hundreds of miles from where they now were. "The Eye of Doom," muttered Logan. "It's a gargantuan fortress buried into the crust of the wasteland. It broadcasts the Emperor's eldritch frequency across the southern hemisphere. It feeds the Doombots, and makes the sky stronger. If we smash the Eye," Sam said, crossing to the map, "the shield drops in this section. And we can send a tachyon signal to the Panopticon." Tony added a fierce, desperate smile to his face. "We'll bring the World Tree's armada down on Doom's head." "It's a suicide mission," said Logan, crossing his broad muscular arms. "The Eye is protected by the Emperor's own strong hitters. Thor's. Brainwashed versions of the God of Thunder who operate as Doom's police force. Your armor is a paperweight. The captain has one wing. The Spider Kid is out of juice and your luminous ninja is running on fumes. You walk on the Eye, you perish." Naruto stood. He would not budge. He strapped the Void Slayer tightly across his back. He went to Logan. Two warriors would stand against each other. The grizzled, immortal mutant who lost at everything, and the young, dimension-displaced shinobi who wouldn't let it happen again. "We have died before." Naruto placed a palm over his heart. where the little dormant spark of primal gold lay. And we have learned that the grave is just another hurdle. Naruto looked the Ronin in the eye. "You saved us in the desert, Logan," Naruto replied, holding out his hand. "Help us to break the heavens. Help me to hurl the thunder down on the man who took your world." Logan gazed at the cage's scarred and calloused hand. In Naruto's blue eyes he saw the ghosts of 100 fights. What he saw was the same dumb, stubborn, magnificent gallantry that had sent his own companions to their deaths. But as he looked at Naruto, Logan recognized one thing. This boy didn't only battle for the fallen, he fought for the live ones. Logan blew out a cloud of cigar smoke and sighed, long and hard. He stretched out and grabbed Naruto's hand, and his hold, laced with adamantium, was total. "Okay, bub," Logan hissed. A savage, vicious grin spread across his scarred face. "Let's go kill a god." The scavenger rovers strengthened. Corroded iron windows obscured the view of the Latverian wastelands. Logan piloted the armored vehicle with one hand on the steering yoke and the other resting on the stick shift. He navigated the hazardous, fractured dirt with the instinct of a man who has spent his life fleeing ghosts. In the back of the rover, the Alliance prepared for war using scraps. Tony 892 sat cross-legged on the trembling floor, his silver endo-sim armor in a dull, hard sleep condition. He was actively extracting wires from a salvaged Doombot chassis and splicing them into his gauntlet's communications array. Tony whispered, clutching a wire between his teeth while his hands worked, "If we drop the localized Eldritch shield, I have exactly one shot to broadcast a Tachyon squirt to the Panopticon. However, the signal requires a tremendous power burst to penetrate the upper atmospheric interference." "Can you use the rover's battery?" Sam Wilson inquired, carefully field stripping and cleaning his sidearm. His damaged vibranium wing was snugly curled against his back. Tony deadpanned. "The rover runs on a combustion engine and spit, Cap. I require localized, raw, and multiversal voltage. I need a lightning bolt." Logan slammed the brakes and shouted, "You're in luck, Tin Man." The rover skidded to a standstill, creating a large cloud of crimson dust. Because the forecast just called for a storm. Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes. The deep, restorative meditation had done little to refill his Void Sage chakra, but his hyper-tense Saiyan muscles were no longer wailing in pain. He clutched the Void Slayer's massive hilt, feeling the cool, familiar weight of the celestial marble. They got out of the rover. Before them stood the Eye of Doom. Unlike Griffin's citadel, this skyscraper was not elegant and business in design. It was a brutalist castle of black, riveted iron constructed right into the craggy walls of a vast crater. At the very top of the fortress stood a gigantic, shimmering orb of pure, concentrated emerald magic. It pulsed like a heartbeat, creating a sickly green aurora over the wasteland and projecting the localized planetary shield into the sky. However, it was the sky above the fortress that caught their attention. The emerald clouds were violently spinning, accompanied by weird thunderclaps. 3 figures hovered above the fortress entryway. They donned heavy, dark chainmail and red capes that flapped in the gale force winds. They carried several versions of the same legendary weapon, enormous, blocky hammers forged from Uru metal. "The Thor core," Miles Morales said quietly, his eyes widening. He was reclining on a granite outcropping, entirely powered by bioelectricity. "Doom's personal police." Logan warned, discarding the stub of his cigar into the soil. "They aren't the golden retrievers you're used to. Doom pulled Thunder God versions from the most terrible, war-torn timelines. They do not protect, they enforce." Naruto narrowed his eyes and analyzed the surroundings. 3 gods. A fortified gateway. And we're operating fully without heavy artillery. Logan muttered, "We don't need artillery," with a low, predatory growl in his chest. SNIKT. 6 indestructible adamantium claws slid smoothly from his knuckles and gleamed in the green light. "We just need a distraction." Logan did not wait for the tactical countdown. He dashed across the boulders to reach the fortress's huge iron gates. "Hi, Blondie!" Logan shouted, his voice echoing throughout the crater. "Tell Doom his pest control missed a spot." The 3 Thors immediately shifted their attention down. Thor sneered as he wielded his dual-headed battle axe, Hammer Hybrid. "A mutant rat dares to approach the Eye. Strike him down." The 3 gods raised their weapons towards the sky. "Move," Sam shouted, abandoning his cover. During the ground war, as the Thors summoned lightning, Sam Wilson sprang into the air. With only one functional wing, he couldn't fly smoothly, but he could use his Wakandan thrusters to accelerate violently and unexpectedly in the lateral direction. He flung his shield with terrible accuracy. The vibranium disc impacted the rightmost Thor's helmet just as the god was channeling lightning, interrupting his attention and unleashing the raw electrical charge into the soil. Logan attacked the Doombot sentries at the gate like a buzzsaw. He did not bother avoiding the repulsor fire. He let the blast singe his flesh, relying on his mutant healing factor to immediately stitch the wounds closed, before burying his claws in the chest of the nearest machine and cutting it in half. Thor descended from the sky, creating an earth-shattering crater in front of the wasteland Ronin. "Your bones are metal, mutant," Thor exclaimed, his hammer sizzling with fatal power. "Let us see if they melt." Thor struck his hammer in a crushing horizontal arc. Logan ducked, but the impact of the near miss sent him backward. Before Logan could recover, Thor raised his boot and crushed his head. A pale marble blade stopped the boot. Naruto stood over Logan, clutching the Void Slayer in both hands. He had no chakra. The Genesis mode has died. But the sheer, earthly density of his Saiyan biology, refined over a decade of shinobi taijutsu, enabled him to precisely anchor his feet against the god's crushing weight. A mortal who can support the weight of Asgard. The Thor variation lifted an eyebrow in genuine surprise. "I have held heavier things," Naruto said coldly. Naruto twirled the blade, knocking Thor off balance. He didn't employ ninjutsu. Instead, he walked within the god's protection and delivered a hyper-dense palm hit directly to Thor's armored chest. The kinetic force cracked the Uru breastplate, sending the god of thunder tumbling backwards through the red earth. "He's fast," Thor exclaimed to his comrades. "Pin him down." The second Thor recovered from Sam's shield strike. He raised Mjolnir, fixed his gaze on Naruto, and then brought the hammer down, sending a tremendous, concentrated stream of eldritch-infused lightning squarely at the shinobi. "Naruto, move!" Tony yelled from behind, clutching his improvised communications device. Naruto lacked the quickness to avoid. The lightning traveled the distance in a microsecond. He set his feet and hoisted the hefty celestial marble of the Void Slayer like a lightning rod. The defibrillator and the celestial sword were struck by eldritch lightning. Tiamat's bones had anti-cosmic characteristics that instantaneously counteracted the magical properties of the lightning. The green, sickly eldritch magic was vehemently rejected by the stone. However, the strike's pure electrical and kinetic energy was not magical. It was purely physical, and it flowed immediately down the blade, into Naruto's body. Naruto shouted as millions of volts of raw electricity ripped through his nervous system. But Naruto Uzumaki was not a typical mortal. He had the biology of a Saiyan, a race that actively adapted to severe physical trauma. The Zenkai imperative in his cells screamed to life, urgently attempting to assimilate the fatal surge of energy in order to survive. Tony's modified Stark Arc reactor, a kinetic battery designed to absorb multiversal drag, served as a grounding conduit for Naruto. It captured the electrical surge, cycled it, and rammed it into Naruto's chakra network. This was a multiversal defibrillator. The depleted spark of primal gold in Naruto's heart was violently rekindled. Naruto saw a rapid color change in the energy surrounding him. The Thor's harsh, blinding white lightning was engulfed by an unexpected, bursting shaft of deep, earthly gold. Battleworld's ambient multiversal radiation was locked behind Doom's sky, preventing the return of the Void Sage chakra. But the primal gold, the raw, unwavering life power of the sun and earth, surged back to life. Naruto opened his eyes. They blazed with pure, blazing golden fire. The Thor version watched in horror as the mortal completely absorbed the lightning strike. "My turn," Naruto muttered, his voice echoing the earth-shattering roar of the cage. Naruto did not run. He disappeared. The Shunshin was perfect. He appeared immediately over the lead Thor, his golden aura illuminating the dark emerald storm clouds. He didn't use his sword. He directed the newly awakened primal gold into his right hand, compressing the energy to the exact limit of physical density. He punched Thor in the face. The crash caused a sonic boom, shattering the panes of the Eye of Doom. The Thor was thrown downward with the force of a meteor, burying himself 30 feet deep in the Latverian bedrock while fully unconscious. The surviving two Thor's arrogance crumbled in the face of the dazzling Golden Saint. "Logan, Sam," Naruto commanded from above, surrounded by golden fire. "Clear the gates." Logan only needed to be informed once. He flung himself toward the second Thor, his adamantium claws ripping through the chainmail, while Sam utilized a concentrated thruster blast to strike the third Thor in the temple with his vibranium shield. Naruto fell heavily in front of the fortress's gigantic iron gates after disorienting and breaking the Thors. He raised his right hand. His palm created a perfectly spherical, spinning ball of golden kinetic chakra. It wasn't the dark abyss, but rather the hidden leaf's original, blinding brightness. Primal Rasengan. Naruto rammed the spherical against the iron gate. The powerful kinetic drill ripped through the reinforced metal, forcefully blowing the massive doors off their hinges and into the dark corridor beyond. The front door is open. Naruto returned to his team, the golden aura casting shadows across the wasteland. Miles, staggering ahead, looked at the glowing shinobi through wide glasses. He got his juice back. Tony 892 jogged up with his modified gauntlet, a proud look on his face. Lightning strikes the rod, and the battery trips the breaker. Just basic engineering, kid. Logan retracted his claws and spat blood into the dirt. He glanced at Naruto's golden fire with grudging reverence on his damaged face. "I've seen a lot of things come back from the dead," the Wasteland Ronin said as he stepped over the shattered iron gates. "But that's the first time I've seen somebody use a god as a jumper cable." "Tony," Naruto said as he entered the Eye of Doom. "Get ready to send the signal. We're bringing the Emperor's shield down." The Eye of Doom was not a castle within, but an altar for full control. Naruto, Sam, Tony, Miles and Logan passed through the broken iron gates, and were engulfed in the stifling and sickly green light. The walls were lined with huge conduits that poured incandescent eldritch magic upwards like technical arteries, feeding the colossal emerald orb at the summit of the tower. "The architecture is perfect," Tony 892 whispered, his HUD showing a fast, low-power wireframe of the building's interior. "It's a perfect blend of a Kamar Taj sanctuary and a localized Stark Arc reactor. The magic gives it unlimited energy. The tech gives it a solid, physical form. Doom is not only a tyrant. He's an engineer. Megalomaniac. Paints his living room green." Logan grunted, lighting a fresh cigar off the spark of his adamantium claws. "Let's go locate the stairs and shatter his toys." "Naruto, we don't have time for the stairs." Primal gold chakra flickered about him. There was none of the Void Sage's chilly, heavy, anti-cosmic weight. Instead it was warm, blazing and basically earthly. The absolute, distilled life energy of the hidden leaf and the sun. Naruto stared up at the ceiling, tracing the pipes that lit up all the way to the top floor. "Hold on to me," said the Golden Saint. Sam caught Naruto by the left shoulder. Logan rolled his eyes at the Theatrix and took his right. Tony's hand was on Sam's back. Miles stared at Tony's unpowered armor. Naruto bent his knees, golden fire swirled around his vibranium boots. Primal art. Dragon Rising Strike. Naruto went straight up. He didn't use the stairwell, he was like a human bunker buster. His hyperdense Saiyan body, enveloped in explosive kinetic chakra, ripped straight up through the riveted iron ceilings of the stronghold. In 3 seconds they smashed through 5 stories, on a geyser of golden light and powdered metal. They burst through the top floor, smashing down into the polished black iron deck of the main broadcast room. The eye hung right over them, a swirling globe of pure, concentrated eldritch magic, 30 feet across. It crackled with scary strength, sending a focused beam of green light straight up through a hole in the roof, keeping the localized planetary shield going. But the Guardian was sitting precisely beneath the sphere. He didn't sit down on a chair. He sat on a throne made entirely of crushed bones of silver Ultron skulls and broken chest plates of Kong Centurions. He was a big fella. He made the Thor versions look like kids. His skin was bruised green, a green that irradiated. He donned thick, barbarous armor of Asgardian Uru, and a ragged dark green cape was slung over his huge shoulders. His hair was pure white, balding on top, and his eyes burned with a terrible, hyper-intelligent, ancient fury. "The Maestro," Miles gasped out, like a whisper. The magistrate spake of him. A Hulk variant, Tony's voice choked. But he doesn't look like a mindless rage monster. He seems like he's performing math. The maestro rose. His physique was so physically dense that the thick iron floor groaned. Math's the only language left when the universe stops screaming, Stark, rumbled the maestro. His voice was deep and clear and carried the crushing weight of total cynicism. I watched my world burn. I saw my pals dissolve to dust. And then God Emperor Doom gave me sanctuary. A quiet place where the Gamma could at last rest. The maestro climbed down from his throne of skulls. You bring noise to my tranquil place. The maestro stared at the golden aura coming from Naruto. I am going to break your spines, and then I am going to read a book in the quiet. If you wanted silence, Big Green, Logan growled, his 6 adamantium claws sliding out with a metallic snikt. You should have stayed in the basement. The golden and the green. The maestro didn't shout, he didn't just charge blindly. He moved terribly, deliberately fast. He made the distance in one leap, throwing up a huge green fist the size of a boulder, aiming a localized, devastating blow squarely at Tony 892, seeing the unpowered armor as the weak point. Get out of the way, Sam shouted, shoving Tony back. Naruto caught on. He didn't even attempt to block the maestro's fist. Trying to stop a gamma-irradiated titan head-on was a lost game of physics. Instead, Naruto dodged under the giant arm, channeled the primal gold into his left palm, and punched upward, hitting the maestro square in the diaphragm. The kinetic impact was like a tactical nuclear. The maestro's eyes widened slightly as the weight of the earth under him lifted his 2-ton bulk clean off the ground. Logan was airborne before the maestro had even hit the ground. The wasteland Ronin turned, smashing all 6 adamantium claws into the maestro's broad, armored back. The unbreaking metal bit through the Uru plate and plunged deep into the irradiated green flesh. With a groan of pain, the maestro twisted wildly in midair. He reached back and grabbed Logan by the throat and pushed the mutant onto the iron floor with enough power to shatter bedrock. Logan, Miles shouted. The maestro raised his boot to smash the Ronin. Clang. Sam Wilson's vibranium shield hit the maestro's temple like a bullet, snapping the gigantic head sideways and off balance. The maestro staggered and Logan slid away coughing up a horrifying amount of blood, but his mutant healing factor was already actively putting his fractured ribs back together. You punch hard for a human, the maestro hissed, all his attention on Naruto, but Gamma is infinite. The maestro clapped his hands. It wasn't a normal sonic boom. It was a hyperdense, confined, kinetic shockwave, powered by the dark intelligence of the maestro. The shockwave tore through the iron deck plate, rushing toward the Alliance like a tangible wall of force. Naruto planted his vibranium boot. He did not dodge. He clapped his hands together, fingers making the hidden leaf's crossed hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Next to Naruto appeared 2 solid golden clones. The 3 Narutos advanced and pushed their hands to absorb the maestro's shockwave. The primal gold chakra flared. A huge wall of golden kinetic energy collided with the gamma wave fiercely. The noise of the crash deafened everyone in the room. The green and golden powers counteracted each other in a blinding burst of concussive force. Tony. Naruto shouted above the roaring in their ears. We will stand firm. Drop the shield. The broken emerald Tony sprinted across the room, bringing his jury-rigged gauntlet up. He stared up at the great spinning emerald sphere of the eye above him. I can't just hack it, Tony shouted back, staring frantically at the conduits. It's not running on code, it's a closed-loop eldritch matrix. I need physical access to the core to broadcast the tachyon squirt, and that sphere is generating a localized repulsion field. Now you must crack the shell. Understood, said Naruto. The golden clones attacked the maestro, fighting the Hulk variant in a hyper-violent, super-fast exchange of blows. The maestro swatted a clone away with a backhand, but the second clone spun a kick into the Titan's mouth before dissolving in a plume of golden smoke. The real Naruto didn't beat the maestro. He reached for the Void Slayer at his back. He crouched down, pouring every single bit of his regained primal gold chakra not into the sword, but into his legs. Naruto shot up, rocketing straight for the giant 30-foot emerald sphere of the eye. The maestro saw it coming. No, shouted the maestro, leaving Sam and Logan behind. He picked up one of the large severed iron conduits from the ground and threw it like a javelin straight at the back of Naruto's rising body. Webs! Cried Miles. Bioelectricity drained. Miles Morales didn't need venom to be a hero. He shot out a mechanical web line and fastened it to the flying iron conduit. Miles braced his feet and tugged with all his natural spider power, jerking the heavy projectile sharply off course. It flew inches past Naruto and harmlessly embedded itself in the ceiling. Naruto reached the peak of his jump, hanging in front of the enormous, spinning eldritch sphere. The repulsion field pressed against him, threatening to send him flying across the room. Naruto raised the Void Slayer. Naruto instantaneously calculated that the primal gold was a kinetic force. But the celestial marble is anti-cosmic. It kills magic. Naruto did not draw his sword. He held the heavy, pale marble blade with both hands and pushed the point straight into the spinning green face of the sphere. The celestial stone howled when it struck the eldritch magic. The blade's anti-cosmic characteristics fiercely violently rejected the confined reality of the spell. Shatter! Naruto ordered and released a large localized burst of primal gold chakra through the hilt of the sword. The hammer was the kinetic force and the chisel the celestial blade. The impregnable eldritch orb shattered with a sound like 1,000 glass windows being broken. The fissure spread like a spiderweb over the 30-foot surface. And then it burst. A huge silent shockwave of green and gold energy filled the room. The stifling, absolute miraculous pressure of the eye was gone at once. Up above, through the hole in the roof, the sickly emerald aurora of Doom's planetary shield flickered furiously. The Latverian sky tore open for 50 miles around, showing the dark, tumultuous, unspooled purple currents of the quantum bleed beyond. The lock was busted. The beacon in the night, the sky is clear. Sam! Shouted Tony. Tony didn't hesitate. He drove his jury-rigged gauntlet deep into the core of the eldritch as soon as it was exposed, now nothing more than a blazing, unstable cluster of raw energy. The silver endo-sim armor sizzled furiously as it absorbed the raw, unfiltered magical voltage, directing it straight to the communications array. Friday, if you're still in there, punch the ticket, Tony yelled, the armor heating up to critical. Tachyon squirt engaged. A blazing, invisible, faster-than-light data pulse rocketed upward from the modified gauntlet. It was more than the broken roof, it was through the 50-mile hole in the green sky and into the endless black of the bleed. The message was plain. It had the precise multiversal coordinates of Battleworld, the makeup of Doom's troops, and one line of writing from Tony Stark. We're in the cellar. Bring down the hammer. Tony wrenched his gauntlet from the core, falling back into the iron platform, his armor smoldering and dying. Naruto landed heavily alongside him, his golden aura dimming a little as he sheathed the Void Slayer. The maestro looked up at the broken sky, his dark green face twisting into a mask of complete, paralyzing horror. Fools, the maestro murmured, collapsing to his knees, his huge hands quivering. You didn't just smash the lock. You woke the god. Suddenly the indoor temperature dropped to 0 Kelvin. The air didn't just get heavy. It stopped moving. The dust hanging in the air froze in midair. Outside the wind had died down. A voice boomed through the chamber. It didn't come out of a loudspeaker. It didn't come out of the wall. It manifested right into their bone marrow. You dare to bring the outside into my perfect world? The shadows in the corner of the room started to stretch and twist themselves into a tall humanoid figure cloaked in emerald, horrifying in its form. The cold, riveted iron mask of God Emperor Doom throbbed with the darkness, an eldritch pressure so complete that the maestro crouched in the mud. Doom had not dispatched an army. He had poured his own absolute, holy presence right into the stronghold itself. Signals away, guys, Tony wheezed from the floor, looking up at the horrific embodiment of the Emperor. But I think we just pissed off the landlord. Naruto walked forward, placing himself between his fatigued friends and the God Emperor. The primal gold flashed savagely, alone, sullen light amid the terrible, unfathomable blackness. The alliance is coming, Doom, Naruto said, his blue gaze not wavering. Let them come. Doom's metallic voice boomed with a sublime, terrible arrogance. I'll show him how a god weeds his garden. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.